Hello everybody, I'm Brainy Diode, and I am back with a video that exists. I played more games for the first time in 2019 than in any year before, and I feel like talking about them, so I'm gonna do that. This is basically what it says on the tin. Here are the games I played, here's what I thought of them. They're ranked from my least favorite to my favorite. I don't feel like writing an introduction, so let's go. Number 17, Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge is a 2008 first-person platformer parkour game made by EA, and it's unfortunately the winner of the biggest disappointment of the year award from me. First of all, a first-person perspective just doesn't work for a platformer. I could never look at the platform I was jumping for and how far I had left until the edge of the platform I was currently on at the same time. And with how many times this game requires very accurate jumping, that's kind of a pretty big problem. Secondly, the controls were a little awkward. I mean, who maps jump to a shoulder button? I believe there is a way to create custom button mapping, but figuring the developers knew better than I did, I went through the game with the default scheme, and at the end, I'm not sure this was the right decision. Third, and this is probably just a me problem, but I just could not follow the plot, and that made it very difficult to get invested in it. I was really excited to try this game out, and I'm still convinced that there's a good game in here somewhere, but between often unresponsive controls, combat segments that were at the same time dull and frustrating, and level design that just felt a bit too obtuse for a game with so much focus on speed, I just couldn't find it. Number 16, Rise of the Tomb Raider. If, while playing a sequel, you ever wish you were playing the original, that means the game has failed in its most important job as a sequel, carrying on what made the original worth playing, while improving upon what didn't work the first time. I really wish Crystal Dynamics' 2015 title Rise of the Tomb Raider had beat out its predecessor on this list, not only because it would allow the comparisons I'm about to make between the two games to make a lot more sense, but also because I don't like disliking games. To the credit of Rise of the Tomb Raider, it adds some new mechanics like crafting, rope swinging, and tree climbing. They're all fun in their own right. And it did make some improvements to the combat system that was, in my opinion, the weakest part of the first game. But nearly every other returning mechanic from the first game was a downgrade. The controls were less tight, the story was less coherent, the characters were less impactful, the puzzles were more frustrating, and the spectacles were less spectacular. Ultimately, rather than reminding me of why I started to get invested in the Tomb Raider reboot series, the second entry killed my interest in playing future games almost entirely, which is most definitely not something you want your sequel to do. Number 15, Vanquish. Anyone who has talked to me for more than about 5 minutes knows that I like Platinum games. Heck, I just did a nearly year-long Let's Play of one of their more popular titles. So I played this 2010 title to answer one question. Can Platinum games make me like shooters? The answer is, unfortunately, no. It's a pretty mechanically sound shooter, and I don't really have much to complain about, except the disappointing lack of variety in enemies and location design, but that's small potatoes. Ultimately, I'm just not very fond of shooters, so my dislike of this game is purely subjective. If you like shooters and you like Platinum, I'd still definitely recommend checking this one out, but it just wasn't for me. Number 14, Fire Emblem Warriors. Fire Emblem is a series that I've had my eye on for a while, especially since several of my Smash Bros. Mains are from the series, and a lot of my friends absolutely love it, and sometimes when we hang out, they'll just talk to each other about Fire Emblem and other stuff I know nothing about, and I just sit there for a while like, guys, we're hanging out at my house, and you've excluded me from the conversation for so long that I literally had time to go get my laptop and compose half a song, and you didn't even notice, but that's not the point. As I was saying, Fire Emblem is a series that I've had my eye on for a while, but the tactics genre is another that I've never really been able to get into, So, when 2017 saw the release of Fire Emblem Warriors, a crossover between Intelligent Systems' Fire Emblem and Koei Tecmo's hack and slash Dynasty Warriors, I knew I would have to pick it up eventually. Well, this year I finally tried it out, and the combination of quick, powerful action and tactical thinking grabbed my interest quickly, but failed to keep it. The hits in the combat just didn't feel heavy enough to be particularly satisfying, and the tactical diversions were interesting enough until I realized the AI could handle the tactics just as well, if not better, than I could. Add to this the fact that the game never actually tells you how to switch out which characters will be playable in the next map, causing my team to be horribly unbalanced by the end of the game, and I got an experience that I certainly didn't hate, but also definitely didn't love nearly as much as I hoped I would. Ultimately, this game failed to do what I wanted it to do most, convince me to give Fire Emblem another try. Number 13, Tales of Berseria. Tales is yet another franchise I've been meaning to try out for a while, but never really got around to. I'm beginning to sense a pattern here. And as such, Bandai Namco's 2016 title, Tales of Berseria, is the first Tales game that I've played all the way through, though I did log a few hours on a friend's copy of the 3DS version of Tales of the Abyss a few years ago. I was excited when I first tried out the action combat because action RPGs are one of my favorite genres, but after 20 hours or so, it started to become a little tiring. Up to that point, I had been able to button mash through almost every battle, but right around the 20-hour mark, there was a sudden difficulty spike, and I knew that I would have to either actually learn to strategize with the game's battle system or level grind a bunch. While the former almost definitely would have been easier and maybe more fun, I'm sorry, 20 hours into a game is too late to expect me to start learning the game's strategies. Either convince me at the start that it's necessary, or drip feed me new combat mechanics through the course of the game that I can gradually add to my strategy. The story was solid enough, but wasn't quite engaging enough to keep me from feeling that the game overstayed its welcome just a little. I do love a good character customization system, though. Number 12. Katamari Damacy Reroll. What's that? Another franchise that I'd wanted to try out for a while but didn't get around to until 2019? I promise this is not going to be the case for the entire video. Katamari Damacy Reroll is a 2018 remaster of the 2004 Namco title Katamari Damacy, a game with a premise so weird that it's honestly pretty hard to describe without just watching someone play it, but I'll try. You play as a tiny alien prince rolling around a ball that picks up most things smaller than it, and the more it picks up, the bigger it gets, and the bigger stuff you can pick up. Seriously, if you're not familiar with the series, go look it up. It's really goofy. Unfortunately, almost as bad as a game that overstays its welcome is one that understays it. Katamari Damacy Reroll is just really short. Too short, I think, to justify the price, unfortunately. And it's too bad, too, because that's my only major complaint with it. Sure, the controls are janky, but that's an intentional design decision, and in my opinion, just adds to the charm. I just wish I had gotten more than 5 hours of playtime out of it. Number 11, Wander Song. Breaking up the recent pattern is Greg Lobanov's 2018 indie puzzle platformer Wander Song, which can't be from a franchise I've wanted to try for a while on account of it being a new IP. The game tells the story of a bard who travels the world dispelling conflict not through combat, but through song. One of the first things you're likely to notice about the game is its art style, which, despite me not being sure how I felt about it at first, really won me over pretty quickly. I can't say I expected too much story out of this game, so I was pleasantly surprised by just how plot-heavy it is, and just how well the story is delivered. And I honestly don't think I can say there was a single character I genuinely disliked. I thought the bard himself was a little on the bland side for a while, but a scene in the mid to late game that I'm pretty sure was totally optional totally redeemed his character for me. I'm not going to spoil it, but if you play the game for yourself, once you get to the university level, make absolutely sure you stop by the dance club. I promise you won't regret it. But I'm getting sidetracked. With how charming the game was, though, I really have to say the gameplay didn't engage me much, which is why the game is so far down on the list. I definitely can't say I regret playing the game, though, and I definitely think it's worth a try. Number 10, Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider has been one of the most iconic series in gaming for a long time, but surprisingly enough, this also doesn't fall into the category of a franchise that I've wanted to try for a while. In fact, I picked up Crystal Dynamics' 2013 reboot of the franchise almost on a whim, and I've gotta say, I'm glad I did. Spectacle is this guy's middle name, and man is it exciting to be part of all the insane tricks this game has Lara pull. I don't think I've ever had the feeling of playing a campy action movie more than I had while playing this game, and I mean that in the best way possible. To add to the visual charm of the game's graphics, which I think at least still look really good 6 years later, the puzzle solving was also really solid, which left me confused about why it was so sparse and almost entirely optional. The one thing that keeps this game from being higher on the list is the massive number of dull combat segments. This game definitely sets a solid foundation, but with plenty of room for improvement, which I hope the sequels that I'll almost certainly be playing capitalize on. I should note that I wrote this segment before playing Rise of the Tomb Raider and decided to keep that last bit in to further emphasize why Rise is so low on the list. Number 9, Just Cause 3. Another franchise game that I tried pretty much on a whim, Avalanche Studios' 2014 title Just Cause 3 is, well, it's a lot of fun. The action of getting to destroy almost everything was crazy and exciting, and any game that can get me to avoid the quick travel system for a substantial portion of my playtime just because moving around its world is so much fun on its own is certainly doing something right. Unfortunately, it does have a lot of shootery aspects that I didn't love, and it suffers the same problem as Tales of Berseria in that it's a bit too long without changing the core gameplay loop enough to keep things interesting on the tail end. But the reason this game is so much higher than Berseria's is because this game's core gameplay loop was a lot more fun from the beginning. Number 8, Hitman Season 1. Stealth games are another... Okay, let's just say I tried out a lot of new things in 2019. Hitman Season 1, a 2016 title from IO Interactive, is a lot of fun, but unfortunately, I feel like this is a situation where my creativity failed me. I relied on the opportunities the game supplied far more often than I care to admit, and my lack of patience caused me to get a little bit bored with some of the segments where stealth is more integral, which really started to wear me out towards the end of the game. That being said, there is so much to love in this game. It looks amazing, the mechanics are really solid, and there's a wonderful variety of locations here that really force you to change up your playstyle in engaging ways. From an objective standpoint, this is easily one of the best games I played this year. It's just a bit of my own subjectivity that lowered the amount of enjoyment I got from it. This game isn't for everybody, but it's really good at being what it wants to be. Number 7, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna the Golden Country. Oh, the great debate. Is Monolith Soft's 2018 title Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna the Golden Country a DLC pack for Xenoblade 2, or is it a separate game? The answer is yes, probably. And since it's not a separate game, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it here. This is another game that I think was betrayed a little by my expectations, especially in the story department. I was really looking forward to see Jin's descent into villainy firsthand, but that's not what we got. Still, I could have looked past that if it weren't for another very big and admittedly very subjective problem. When I'm playing RPGs, I almost always get absorbed in the main plot so much that I forgo side quests in favor of advancing said main plot. I know that's not really how you're supposed to play RPGs, but that doesn't change the fact that the story grinding to a halt not once but twice during seemingly critical moments to force the player to do a bunch of side quests to advance was a real mood killer for me. Those are really my only major complaints though. I do think I prefer Xenoblade 2's battle system a little bit over this one, but it was a fun new experience to try out. If you enjoyed Xenoblade 2, you're probably going to like Torna. If you haven't played Xenoblade 2, do yourself a favor and don't start with this game. Trust me, you'll be very lost. Number 6, StarLink, Battle for Atlas. As I've mentioned previously, there are very few shooters that I can get into easily. But fortunately, Ubisoft's 2018 title, StarLink Battle for Atlas, was one of them. Not sure how much this affected my opinion, but I figure it's worth noting that I did play the digital-only version, so I didn't do anything with the toys-to-life parts of the game. Anyway, I think a large part of what elevated this experience above a lot of others for me was that it didn't feel a lot like a shooter. At least, not ones that I've played. With an open world that's pretty much fully explorable very early on, this breaks the mold of a lot of hallway-esque shooters like Mass Effect or the Tomb Raider reboots, and cover is basically non-existent, forcing you to be much more aggressive. Speaking of Mass Effect, there's a lot of elements of the story, UI, and sound design that are fairly obviously borrowed from that franchise, but this is different enough in terms of gameplay that calling it a Mass Effect ripoff would be a pretty big stretch. The Star Fox additions to the Switch version were a fun diversion from the main plot, but I don't think the game would be missing too much without them, so you have my blessing to try this out on any platform you'd like. Number 5, Fez. Alright, top 5 time. Fez is a 2012 puzzle platformer by the Polygon Corporation that plays with perspective, and dang, there were a lot of P's in that sentence. The game's unique mechanic is one that's pretty hard to explain succinctly, but that's not going to stop me from trying. The game's world is three-dimensional, but you can only see 2 dimensions of it at a time, so the angle that you're looking at the world from affects where you can go. Normally, I'm not one for pixel art, but I've gotta admit, this game looks really good. And if you don't think the dimensionality mechanic lends itself to some of the most interesting, most inventive puzzle design you've ever seen, I'm sorry, I don't think we can be friends anymore. Joking aside, Fez is a lot of fun, and if you haven't tried it out yet and aren't afraid to flex your brain a little bit, I highly recommend it. Number 4, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. Courtroom drama isn't a genre you see a lot in video games, so I didn't find a particularly large amount of luck finding something to supplement the Ace Attorney kick I was on a couple of years ago. But I heard a lot of comparisons between that series and this one, so I tried out the anime adaptation of the first game and did wind up having some fun with it. I eventually wound up picking this 2012 Spike Chunsoft game up, since the first game is the only one with a direct anime adaptation, and boy am I glad I did. Now, it doesn't take a long time to figure out that Danganronpa is not a traditional courtroom drama, but I honestly think it'd be pretty difficult to argue that the series doesn't fit in the genre at all. It also plays a lot differently from Ace Attorney, and while there were a couple minigames that had me wishing for Ace Attorney's more simplistic gameplay, most of the courtroom minigames were a ton of fun. And that, combined with a stronger focus on story and how the story affects the characters, elevates this game to on the level of, if not above, Ace Attorney for me. Number 3, Astral Chain. Astral Chain was the second Platinum Games title I tried for the first time this year, and I think it's the first time I've ever bought a game on release day. Man, am I glad I did. This 2019 game centers around a police officer in a futuristic city being invaded by creatures from another dimension. And while I was expecting the game to put most, if not all of its eggs in the basket that is its unusual combat system, intriguing premise, and beautiful world design, when I actually got into the game and started picking up empty soda cans off sidewalks, reconnecting lost children with their parents, and getting fined for jaywalking, I realized that you can do, actual police work in this game. Can't say I was expecting that. As far as the combat system I mentioned earlier, it's clear from the first boss fight that Platinum Games really thought through all the possibilities this combat system opens up, and it remained interesting and, like any game by these guys, really flashy right up to the very end. Astral Chain hasn't quite taken the title of my favorite Platinum game away from Metal Gear Rising, but it makes a really strong case for second place. Number 2, Sonic Generations. I've gotta admit, I was really surprised by how much I liked this game. Sonic Generations was released by Sega in 2011 to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and as far as anniversary titles go, this one is really solid. The level design was leagues above anything else I've seen in my admittedly very limited experience with the franchise, and the fact that the game rewards skilled play far more than it punishes poor play means that more than any other platformer I've ever played, I love revisiting the levels over and over again. Even though I bought the game back in May and made it through the main story in under 15 hours, I still go back and sharpen my skills back up every once in a while. The sense of speed I get when I'm really good at a level is exhilarating, as is discovering a new area that I only got to because I pulled off a difficult move. What else can I say? This game is a ton of fun. And honorable mentions. These are games that I started in 2019 but didn't play a lot of for whatever reason. Subnautica, Unknown Worlds Entertainment 2018. I really don't have much objective criticism to level against this game. I just don't like survival games very much. Super Beat Sonic, Neurojoy 2015. The mechanics to this rhythm game are solid and have a lot of potential, but I'm not particularly fond of the song selection. Oninaki Demo, Tokyo RPG Factory 2019. I'm pretty pleased with what I've seen of this game so far. I've already bought the full version and fully intend to get back to this one eventually. Dragon Quest XI Demo, Square Enix 2017. I'm actually pretty surprised at how much this game failed to grab my attention. After putting about 2 hours into the demo, I'll be honest, I have no desire at all to pick this game back up. Demon X Machina Prototype Missions and Demon X Machina Prologue, Marvelous Incorporated 2019. I love myself a good giant mech, so finding the first demo as dull as I did was pretty disappointing. By the time the second demo rolled around, I didn't notice any significant improvements, and even the only part I did enjoy got worse. So I currently have no plans to pick up the full version. Avasti and Venture B. Cullen, Brigham Young University 2019. Only on this section of the list because of how short it is. Check out my video on this game for my full thoughts. Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony, Spike Chunsoft 2017. I literally started this game with 2 days left in the year, so I haven't quite had time to make it all the way through yet. Suffice it to say that so far, I'm loving this one just as much as the second. And the number one game that I played for the first time in 2019 actually falls into a rule that I meant to put into the introduction that I didn't feel like writing, but I should probably mention the rule, which is that if the game came out really late in 2018, or I actually started it in 2018, but put in most of my time in it in 2019, it still qualifies for this list. And based on that rule, I'm sure you can guess what my number one is. It's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Let's be honest here, Smash Ultimate didn't really try to do anything new or innovative, but what it did do was take the formula established by the previous 4 titles in the series and improve on nearly every aspect. Not story mode, though. World of Light has nothing on Subspace Emissary. This is the first Smash game since Melee to include every fighter to appear in a previous title, and it even adds several characters that not a lot of people could have seen coming, but are very welcome additions to the Smash family nonetheless. This has become a game where you can have Mario, Sonic, Cloud, Strife, Solid Snake, Banjo and Kazooie, Pac-Man, Sans Undertale, and Bayonetta all fight each other at the same time. It's still sometimes difficult to fathom how this game even exists. With over 70 playable characters, a wealth of options, and a stage creator, the modern Smash Bros. Experience is customizable to an almost absurd degree, and I love it. And with even more DLC characters on the horizon, the latest entry in the Smash Bros. Franchise is a gift that just keeps on giving. And I just realized that just like I didn't feel like writing an intro to this video, I didn't write an outro at all. Whoops. So, sorry I was a bit lazy with a couple of the framing bits, but hopefully you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on these games. That's really all I have this time. And so until the next one, have a good. Have a good. That's how I'm ending the video again.